Here's a song that will get your heart rate up. Every time I sing the word up, reach for the stars. Every time I sing the word down, touch the ground. The rest of the time, march with your knees high. Those magnificent men in their flying machines, they go up to the up, up, they go down to the down, down. They enchant all the ladies and see all the scenes with their up to the up, up, and their down to the down, down.
Hello and welcome to the Powell River Airport in beautiful Powell River, British Columbia, Canada. Home of my experimental home-built seaplane, the Spirit of Mackenzie. Not this plane, but the same configuration as of this, what I believe is a vintage Seaplane. Much older, of course, and quite a bit larger than the Spirit of Mackenzie, but the same configuration. A seaplane with a pusher prop. Birds of a feather, so to speak. This is the junior member of the flock. My seaplane. Experimental, home-built Searey. I've been working on for almost 7 years now. But the end is in sight. I keep promising myself. So please, join me. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, Spirit of Mackenzie. Give me a thumbs up if you think it's warranted. Send me some comments if you got something to say, or even if you don't, just a hi will be nice. Join me as I overcome all the problems and difficulties, challenges, and feel the rewards of building my own seaplane. My name's Bob Grantham, and I look forward to your support. Well, it's a miserable day on the wet coast of Canada. The airport is fog bound. It's been raining torrentially at times for a couple of days now. But perhaps it's a good day to work under the roof of the hangar. Sammy has wisely decided to stay in the back of the SUV on a nice warm blanket out of the rain. And I'm going to tackle a project on the engine, which I neglected to mention at the end of the last episode when I ticked off a few things I have to do now that the engine has finally started. I talked about setting the idle speed, setting the static speed at max RPM, and the pitch of the prop. One thing I didn't mention was the need to install carb heat. In Canada, it's required by the Canadian aviation regulations, the CARS, our Bible, to have carb heat to prevent icing on home-built planes. Not a requirement in America, as I understand it. I believe it is in the UK, and don't know about other jurisdictions. But anyway, it's required on my plane before I can get a certificate of airworthiness from the government. It's not something that's supplied by Rotax. It used to be an option, as far as I know, on the Searey kits and factory models. Now I say it used to be because I believe the predominant way of putting carb heat on a Rotax engine previously was using a kit that came from the UK. And basically what it did is it inserted a collar between the carburetor and the intake manifold on each side. And that collar would accept warmed up coolant from the engine, this coolant circuit. And by circulating that warmed up coolant in a collar, it would warm up the air into the engine and prevent carburetor icing, which is the purpose. But anyway, when I tried to buy that kit last year, I found out from direct contact with the UK supplier they were no longer in the business and no longer supplying. And then I tried to trace the parts through American and Canadian supply houses, and they were all out of stock. So what I ended up doing, through the Rotax dealer in Vernon, where I took my maintenance training on the Rotax, I heard about a fella in a little town of Salmon Arm, BC, I think called Light Engines. if I'm correct. And they manufacture and distribute a different type of carb heat. And this is an electric carb heat. Puts a little probe in the backside of the carburetor, supplies a little bit of electric current to each carb, and thereby heats up the body of the carburetor and prevents icing. The kit's relatively inexpensive, maybe less than $200 Canadian, and relatively easy to install. They even supply the drill bit and the tap required, a bit of wiring, and the two little electrical probes that get inserted into the carburetor body. And on my plane, I even have a set of wires running back into that area in the wiring harness I bought. It was for the original, or an optional cabin heater location, so I have some wiring running back up roughly in that location, and I even have a spare off-on button on my control panel already installed, thinking about this. And of course I'll need a 5-amp fuse, and I have a spare circuit breaker in my power bus, which is, well, you've seen it before, but it's located behind the control panel on the wiring harness tray. So I'm all set up to do this.
Those magnificent men in their flying machines, they go up to the up, they go down to the down. They enchant all the ladies and see all the scenes with their up to the up, and they're down to the down. Up and down, flying around, looping the loop and defying the ground. Up and down, they're frightfully keen, those magnificent men in their flying machines. They can fly upside down with their feet in the air. They don't think of danger, they really don't care. Newton would think he had made a mistake to see those young men and the chances they take. Those magnificent men in their flying machines, they go up to the up, they go down to the down. They enchant all.
It's coming. Voila! The baby is born, his birth. Okay, so I'm going to take it down to the bench now, but first I'll show you what we're going to do. On the back side here, there is a dummy tapping. This face here is a duplicate of this face, presumably so that these carburetors could be used as twins, which they are. So what I'm going to be doing is drilling through this hole, which currently has a bottom in it, drilling into the throat of the carburetor and then tapping and putting the probe in here. Okay, let's go to the bench. So first thing to do is to get the gasoline out of the bowl, and I saw a trick somewhere, but to get this bail off the bottom of the carb using a crescent wrench on the side works. Really? Yep, full of gasoline. A couple of nice little floats in there, and of course the gasket. I'm going to put that right back on. I don't want to be messing around with the insides. So I hear you have to be careful. Get the gasket nicely seated. Everything looks nice and clean in there. Nicely seated, Bob, nicely seated. You don't want to be having to come back in here again before it's necessary. Okay, bale's closed. Okay. Now I'm going to be drilling with this drill supplied with the carb heat kit, drilling out this hole here, right into the throat, and then tapping it. So it's important to make sure we cover with masking tape all these holes here, make sure nothing's going to get back into the center part of the carburetor. So to do that, I'll use masking tape, some paper in here, more tape, and then put a dab of grease on the inside here, so when the drill comes through, any shavings will tend to collect on the grease and be cleaned out.
Fly upside down with their feet in the air. They don't think of danger, they really don't care. Newton would think he had made a mistake to see those young men and the chances they take.
Now that was a 17/64 drill, and now I'm going to tap with this M8 by 1.25 millimeter tap. Both the drill and the tap came with the kit. Yes. Touch of oil might help things. Tapping quite nicely. Brings back memories of metalworking grade 9. So the shop in metalworking grade 9 was a lot nicer than this. Tin roof, out in the rain, gravel floor, nothing level, nothing plumb.
Those magnificent men in their flying machines, they go up to the up, they go down to the down.
With the hole tapped, I then just threaded in the little electrical heater probe with the black wire ground lead secured to it. But there, so far so good. Except poor Sammy's whining away on her rug in the back of the SUV. I better go check on her and buy her off with some treats.
They enchant all the ladies and see all the scenes with their up to the up, and their down to the down, down. Up, down, flying around, looping the loop and defying the ground. Up, down, they're frightfully keen, those magnificent men in their flying machines. Up, down, flying around, looping the loop and defying the ground. Up.
So the carb heat is installed now and wired up. There's the off-on button right there. And so with nothing electrical on really, the dynon shows 2 amps being consumed. So let's power up the carb heat. Okay, 7 amps so far, 8 amps. At least the circuit breaker didn't go, which indicate maybe I wired it up properly. And now let's go check and see if there's some heat getting into the carb bodies. So there's the little carb heat probe. Putting my finger on it. Yeah, it's definitely got heat. Yeah, that side. And there's definitely some heat there. Yeah, that's pretty good. Today we're on the Sunshine Coast Trail again, south of Powell River. We jumped ahead quite a few sections to get access to the trail, and are doing a section called Suicide Pass. And here on a viewpoint, we're looking over the Salish Sea between the mainland and Texada Island. It's very hazy, most likely because of the extreme forest fire condition in the province at this point. Just down there is a little area called Stillwater Bluffs, and a little further down past that point would be Sultry Bay, which is the end of the trail at kilometer number 173. And we're standing at about kilometer 127 right now. Very flat water out there on the salt chuck today. Be perfect for landing the Spirit of Mackenzie once I get her airborne. Gonna run the engine again today. Plan basically is to get it to start. First step, adjust the idle speed to 1800 RPM. Warm it up so we get some 120 degrees oil temperature, Fahrenheit. And then once it's warmed up, shut it down and continue to complete the oil purge by checking the hydraulic lifters clearance. Once that's done, start the engine again, warm it up, and then run it up to static RPM. Static RPM is the highest speed the engine will go, full throttle, while on the ground. That should be pretty exciting. This should be no more than 5,300, 5,500 RPM max. And if it's any different than that, then I have to adjust the propeller pitch to get it to have a static RPM somewhere around 5,300 to 5,500. So that's the test plan for today. So first we'll turn some battery power on. It's the right side of the master. The EFIS computer should fire up. Now, it was quite cold last night. Definitely frost on the ground at the house until almost noon, until the sun burned it off. So just for the heck of it, let's try some carb heat. Yeah. And because I installed the carb heat on the carbs, I emptied the bowls of gasoline. So let's start the fuel pump, electric fuel pump up now. Yeah, you can see I got 8 amps on the EFIS. That's because the carb heat is on, drawing 6 amps over the 2 amps that the Dynon EFIS draws on its own. Okay, preliminary checklist for a test. Fire extinguisher somewhere over there, yes. Tail wheel is tied down, I know that. Chock the main wheels, yes. Fuel cutoff valve on. That's this one in here, it's on. Master switch on, well, the battery is on. Electric fuel pump, it was on. Okay, let's get ready to start this baby. Master on. Electric fuel pump on. Throttle to idle. Throttle is in idle position. Starting carb on. That's this one here.
Clear prop.
down, down. They enchant all the...
So it didn't start that time, obviously. Idle speed, a half turn on the screw. Clear prop.
Ladies, and see all the scenes with their up to the up, up, and their down to the down, down, up and down, flying around, looping the loop and defying the ground. Up and down, they're frightfully keen, those magnificent men in their flying machines. They can fly upside down with their feet in the air. They don't think of danger, they really don't care. Newton would think he had made a mistake to see those young men and the chances they take. Those magnificent men in their flying machines, they go up to the up, up, they go down to the down, down. They enchant all the ladies and see all the scenes with their up to the up, up, and their down.
Well, this has been a disappointing day. I got the engine to start fairly quickly, and then once it had started, it would start very easily after that. Didn't need any starting carb. But the problem is the RPM is way too high. Even with the idle speed screw fully retracted, I mean, you can't get any lower idle speed on the screw than that. It's still over 3,000 RPM in idle, and it's supposed to be 1,800. So I double checked the idle speed screw, and then I put it back where it really should be, 1.5 turns down from full stop. And I also checked the idle mixture screw, 1.5 turns. I checked the Bowden cables and tried to mechanically synchronize between the two carbs. The lowest I could get the RPM on idle was about 3,000, or even a little more. So that's disappointing. I hope I didn't do something in the carburetors when I put the electric carb heat on them. It's the only thing I can think of. Maybe there's some dust or metal inside the carbs, but you'd think that would stop it from operating, not make it run fast. Oh well, another day, another adventure.
Up, down, flying around, looping the loop and defying the ground. Up, down, they're frightfully keen, those magnificent men in their flying machines. Up, down, flying around, looping the loop and defying the ground. Up, down.